The Reid technique is a non-confrontational, non-accusatory process. Oftentimes, defense attorneys, social psychologists, academicians, and members of the media describe the Reid technique as an accusatory process, and they should, and many do, know better. Over 55 years ago, John Reid and his colleague Fred Imbaugh described in the second edition of their book Criminal Interrogation and Confessions, published in 1967, that the non-confrontational interview is an integral part of the investigation process, writing that, quote, during the interview process, the investigator should assume a neutral position and refrain from making any statement or implication about the subject's guilt or innocence. They suggested that the following areas of inquiry should be part of the interview process. Ask the subject if he knows why he is being questioned. Ask them to relate all they know about the occurrence, the victim, and or possible suspects. And obtain from the subject a detailed description about his activities prior to, during the time of, and after the occurrence in question. For decades, we have been teaching in our training programs and in all of our publications that the initial contact with the subject, victim, witness, or suspect should be a non-accusatory, non-confrontational interview, the purpose of which is to develop information, to give the subject an opportunity to tell us their story, to provide any information they may have as to who, what, when, where, why, or how of the issue that is under investigation. Interrogation should only take place when the investigative information indicates the subject's probable involvement in the commission of the issue under investigation. In one of our investigator tips entitled Principles of Practice: How to Conduct Proper Investigative Interviews and Interrogations, published on our website at reid.com, we pointed out several essential elements of the investigative interview process. Number one, the initial contact with the subject, absent a life-saving circumstance, should be a non-accusatory, non-confrontational interview. All interviews should be conducted within the guidelines established by the courts, such as the appropriate advisement of rights, the presence of a parent or guardian for a juvenile, etc. Throughout the interview process, the investigator should maintain a neutral, objective, fact-finding demeanor. During the interview, the investigator should not engage in any accusatory or confrontational behaviors. The interview should begin with casual conversation, biographical information, maybe what the person does for a living, the whole purpose of which is to acclimate them to the interview process, develop some rapport, and to establish a subject's behavioral baseline so we can look for any changes from that baseline as we get into a discussion of the issue under investigation. The investigator should use open-ended questions to develop the subject's statement, story, version of events, or explanation of what happened. We like to follow the 80-20 rule. In the interview, the investigator should do about 20% of the talking, and the subject should do about 80% of the talking. The investigator should observe the subject's verbal and nonverbal behaviors as a guide for the interview questions, suggesting when the subject may be editing, withholding, or possibly even fabricating relevant information, thereby indicating the need to ask a follow-up question about that topic. It's important to remember that there is no behavior unique to truth or deception. All behavior has to be evaluated and considered in the context of the environment, the characteristics of the subject, and their normal behavioral pattern. There are numerous factors that can affect a subject's behavior during the interview that the investigator has to consider and assimilate into the decision process, including culture, mental and psychological impairments, physical condition at the time of the interview, possibly being under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and their level of maturity. A subject's verbal and nonverbal behaviors are not a substitute for evidence, but they can help identify when a subject may be less than candid during the interview, prompting additional follow-up questions that may in fact lead to the discovery of additional incriminating facts or evidence. If a subject offers an alibi during the interview, the investigator should absolutely attempt to confirm the accuracy of that alibi. During the interview process, the investigator should not tell the subject what he or she already knows about the case, but rather listen to the subject's statement and evaluate whether or not their statement is consistent with the known facts and evidence that you already have, Or do the known facts and evidence contradict what the person is telling us? The investigator should not reveal all of the details about the crime. It's critical to withhold those details so they can later be used to corroborate the authenticity of the subject's acknowledgement of what they did. The investigator should evaluate and assess the subject's possible involvement in the commission of the act under investigation by looking at the investigation, case facts, factual evidence, and information developed during the interview and investigation. The interview should be recorded. When the information developed during the interview and investigation indicate the subject's probable involvement in the commission of the act that's under investigation, an interrogation may be warranted. We teach that there are a number of different statements that the investigator can make to initiate the interrogation process. Here are 5 of them. Number 1, as a result of the investigation that we have conducted and considering the information you gave me during our interview, the investigation indicates there are some areas that we still need to clarify. Number 2, the results of our investigation indicate that you have not told me the complete truth about setting the fire in the warehouse. Number 3, as you know, Jim, we've interviewed everyone who's in the area, and you are the only one we cannot eliminate from suspicion. Number 4, I have in this file the results of our investigation into the warehouse fire, and the results of the investigation clearly indicate you are the person responsible for starting that fire. And then finally, the 5th is what is called the non-confrontational approach, in which the investigator begins the process without making any direct statement about the subject's involvement, kind of skirts that issue, and moves into what we call a third-person theme. A third-person theme is a real or fictitious event about the investigator, friend, or a past case experience that depicts a similar type of situation to the one the suspect is being interviewed about. One of the benefits of using a third-person theme is that it minimizes the frequency of denials because it's not specifically directed to the subject. Here's an example of a third-person theme in an employee theft case. Jim, the reason I wanted to talk to you here today is that you remind me of a fellow we had in here a couple of weeks ago. He was young and ambitious, very aggressive, and a real go-getter. By working his way up the ladder at a bank, he went from clerk to teller and finally, within a year, promoted to auditor. Everything seemed to be going well for him. He had a wonderful family, and they were in the process of buying a new home in a very nice subdivision. One day, while he was balancing the books, he noticed a teller had failed to record a $6,000 deposit. This was about the amount of money that he needed to complete his down payment on the new home. So on the spur of the moment, he decided to take the money, anticipating at some point he could get it paid back. I don't think I have to tell you what happened next. The bank noticed a shortage after the customer called and said, "Where's my deposit? I don't see it in my account." So this young auditor came under suspicion, and I remember talking to him, and he was sitting right here, right where you are, telling me how sorry he was for taking the money. And the reason that you remind me of him is that just like you've got a lot going for you. You're intelligent, ambitious, I'm sure a very basically honest individual. And I think what happened is that you act on the spur of the moment because you're under maybe financial pressure to pay some bills, maybe the rent, maybe the mortgage, maybe some unexpected expenses, and so you acted out of character. So in summary, the Reid technique begins with a non-confrontational, non-accusatory investigative interview in which the investigator is a neutral, non-judgmental, objective fact finder. During the interview, the investigator should not engage in any accusatory or confrontational behaviors. When an interrogation is appropriate, there are multiple statements you can make to initiate the interrogation process. For additional information about the Reid technique, please review some of our other video presentations on this YouTube channel. But also visit our website at reid.com and click on the tab for Investigator Tips. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes to listen to this presentation.